Hello, everybody. I'm Elwirfy, and I'm here talking about a video that I saw recently come up that got recommended to me, and I wanted to talk about it with all of you because I think it's really important and to make sure that we're all on the same side about this because I have always been someone who tries to make videos where we're kind of very combative of bad business practices and times when game companies are maybe overreaching or overstepping from where they're supposed to be. Obviously, you saw with the Killing Floor stuff how you know interested I was in making sure that the company was very transparent, and we shamed them for their bad behavior for releasing a bad game. But this is a little bit more serious, and I'm going to have this guy kind of translate and explain what's going on. Obviously, if you haven't seen the original video, you should definitely go watch the original video. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name out of safety, but you should definitely go check out his channel if you haven't already. And let's just go ahead and get into it. But essentially, Ubisoft is making Japan really upset because of the new Assassin's Creed Shadows game that's being released.
This is really happening. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is not happy about Assassin's Creed Shadows. Let's watch this.
この今言ういわゆる朝栗問題ということについてお伺いしたいんですが、
Did you hear that? He said Asakuri issue, meaning we Japanese keep on talking about this all the time.
So that means that the game is already causing an issue within Japan as a whole, and that citizens are upset about it enough to the point where now I think it's the prime minister it says prime minister. The prime minister is now upset with the company because of its poor portrayal of Japanese culture. Because Ubisoft marketed Assassin's Creed Shadows as being a historically accurate and like authentic game, which obviously we definitely know that it's not. But it's concerning that that's where Ubisoft's trying to go to the point where now the actual Japanese government is involved.
So Asakuri issue, he didn't explain about Asakuri issue, right? Because everyone knows.
明日3月20日にですね、発売予定のフランスのUBI ソフトの株式会社制作のゲームソフトのアサシンクリードシャドウズにですね、ついてなんですけど、海外で先行プレイの動画が YouTube でアップされておりまして、それを拝見いたしますと、
That video that went to really viral.
Okay, so there's a viral video. Yeah, so I have only been to Japan once, and that was during kind of this world cruise thing, and we did this tour. And one of the parts of Japan that we got to see was going to I don't want to use the wrong word, but like these holy sites, I guess is what we would call them here. And like there was a part where we were kind of in the woods, and you could see a shrine that was all set up, and is very clear that this is a very highly valued part of Japanese culture and something that needed to be respected a lot. So the fact that in the game you can destroy a shrine in the game, that's incredibly disrespectful to the Japanese culture and their people. And obviously that's upset Japan as well.
And I was surprised that there's a lot of people who think that's okay. I think most of people doesn't know that's that shrine and altar, I guess. But a lot of Japanese people feel offended about that video.
As they should be.
標図シュ
As
ラ
they
イ
should
ン
be.
と実名で私の兵庫県の姫路市の入間の国奏者板手兵図神社が登場します。ゲームの中でですね、主人公の侍は刀を振り回して拝殿内で太鼓や神経祭壇を粉砕しまして、そして境内にいる向こうの民や神職とおもしき人物などを切りつけ弓を射ったりするような乱暴狼藉ができるようになっています。
Yeah, that's the thing. They can just disable it, but they made it object that breakable.
私は
Yeah, there's more to that. So the fact that like you're able to in the game go around and just kind of kill civilians willy-nilly, the fact that this guy Yasuke is supposedly trained to be this samurai, right? So if you're trained as a samurai, you would presumably understand and respect like Japanese culture and Japanese values, and you wouldn't be someone who'd be going around killing innocent civilians. Again, I'm not at all claiming to be an expert on how samurai work, but if he's supposed to be a samurai, I'm pretty sure killing innocent people is not part of the MO. And I'm shocked that they would think that it's cool to not like what they're doing is now they're having a foreigner come in and completely just attack innocent civilians in the game. The fact that you're allowed to do that, and they make it so blatantly easy for you to be destructive, can really lead to a bad impression that Japanese people might be, tolerant of this kind of behavior, which isn't okay. So I think that's another point that I think they're trying to get at with this hearing is the fact that the game allows you to do things that, if they're trying to be historically accurate, you just wouldn't be able to do. You wouldn't be seeing that as a whole. It's just not a part of any sense of realism by any means.
この話を聞いてですね、ちょっと地元の神社でもありますので、直接宮司さんにお話を伺いました。当該ゲーム会社からは神社に対しまして、名称の使用許可などの連絡は一切なかったという。
And you don't have to get permission for, like, I can make a game set in New York, right? I don't need permission from New York to make a game about New York, but if you're claiming that something historically accurate or something's true, you'd expect whoever's doing it to do the research behind it. And since Ubisoft never reached out to the original priest, presumably they just kind of made whatever they thought looked like a shrine from there, instead of getting an actual shrine that's representative of the city where this guy comes from. So it just shows a lack of due diligence.
ということであります。他にも奈良の東大寺などの寺社や古墳などのいわば具体的な映像とか肖像がですね、無許可で使用されております。本日はですね、大串正樹経産副大臣にお越しいただいておりますが、国内外問わずゲームを楽しむユーザーというのは年々増加しておりますが、ゲーム等における固有施設の映像などをですね、無許可で使用することについてご見解をお伺い。
Before we hear the take on that, I think again, kind of to reiterate the point, is that you don't, as far as I know, you don't need permission to reference something in a game because it's whatever the equivalent of fair use, right? Like if something's in public, you can talk about it, but like they're not claiming ownership, right, of the things in the game as like being theirs, right? They're not saying, oh, Japan doesn't own this piece of shrine, we do. They're not saying that. They're just using it as a representation, because ultimately it is a fictitious thing. I can write a book about anything, and that's all fair to reference things. I don't know if the law is different in Japan. Maybe they don't let you write fiction like that. But as far as I know, it's not illegal, but it might, of course, be distasteful, right? So there's kind of two things going on. There's the legal side of it, but then there's also the, well, is it like something you should be doing socially? That's kind of the bigger issue, I think, that we're talking about. Not so much the legal ramifications. As far as I know, France is in every right to make the game, right? I don't think there's anything illegal about making a game set in Japan, but it's more about ethics, morals, and again, social acceptance.
お伺いしたいと思います。
経済産業省大串副大臣。
This is just kind of insider note. I know some people that send me this video. So, they didn't use word of Yasuke. Can't talk about it that detail, but something really scared concerns me. It's that there's an unspoken rule. You cannot cause other trouble to other ministries. I heard they can't use word of Yasuke in here. If we were Japanese, I think this is one of the biggest concern. And they decided to not to mention about Yasuke. That's what they told me. But my concern is that which ministry get trouble if they use word of Yasuke in here? As a Japanese, that's one of the biggest concern. What's going on, really?
So, from my understanding, he's talking about the fact that you're not supposed to, like, every, like, ministry, I guess it sounds like they have to keep to themselves. So, since Yasuke is a made-up character, there's question about whether or not any particular ministry would be claiming responsibility, seemingly. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. Feel free to leave a comment if I'm not understanding correctly, but it seems like he's implying that there's a certain group that holds specific trouble or specific ownership with Yasuke itself, and so they're not able to talk about it because of a respect thing, I believe. Although I'm surprised that if this is something that's being a big enough of a threat to Japan as a culture as well as their economic status, I'm surprised they would be compelled to leave out mentioning certain aspects of the game that are causing these problems. I think that's an interesting cultural difference.
はい、お答えいたします。一般的なゲーム制作におきまして、現存する固有名詞等を商用利用する際には、その知的財産を有する個人や団体等に許可を得る必要があるものと認識をしております。
Yeah, so and that's how it works in Japan. That's fine. I mean, they have their own laws, but in terms of France's laws, I'm pretty sure they're free with that. Like, and now granted, if you sell something, right? Because I just was talking about writing or creating something. Now, if you're actually selling something and you're using the likeness of someone else, you do need permission, as far as I know. But I wonder if there is a lot difference between claiming something is fictitious versus claiming something historically accurate. Now, granted, in this case, they did claim it to be historically accurate, so Assassin's Creed Shadows should be getting permission from everyone, is my opinion.
知的財産を無許諾で利用されているケースにおきましては、個別の事情によるものであるため、当事者間で協議されるものと承知をしております。その上で、神社側等から相談がございましたら、関係省庁と連携しつつ、適切に対応してまいりたいというふうに思います。
I think that's fair. I think I agree with that.
加田博之君。
ありがとうございます。今の答弁ありましたようにですね、やっぱり無許可で使用するということは本当にいけないことだと思いますし、本当にこのことについては私もしっかりと注視していきたいと思っております。それでですね、それに伴いまして昨今、コロナ禍の影響も薄れまして、観光客が急回復しまして、各地でオーバーツーリズムによるさまざまな問題が生じております。
Yeah, so something that I haven't mentioned yet on the channel, because I typically try and avoid that part of YouTube, but I'm aware of it. There's lots of content creators who think it's okay to be going to Japan to cause trouble in the streets and to harass people and to just be disrespectful as a whole. Obviously, this isn't okay. Obviously, this is bad. And obviously, those people who are coming to a country to be obnoxious should be deported. I'm pretty firm on that. If you come to any country, no matter who it is, you would want whoever is a foreigner who's coming into a native land to be removed from that land if they're not respecting the country that they're going into. So I think everyone pretty much agrees with that. That's not a new thing. But I wonder, because of the lack of enforcement that so far Japan has not been doing, or not has been doing. I don't know how you'd word that. Essentially, Japan doesn't really enforce deportation as much as it really should for foreigners who are being disrespectful, because in Japan they very much so, I believe, very don't want to cause trouble. They want to keep the social order, keep the peace, right? So I'm hoping that'll be changing soon, because this is obviously a big concern, and obviously it's not okay for any foreigner to be going to Japan to just cause trouble. They might even shut down tourism. But tourism is a big part of Japan's economy, so I'm curious what they will make of this.
中に神社の鳥によじ登ったりですね、神社の石柱へ落書きするなど観光客の迷惑行為は観光公害とも言える事態であります。
Yeah, if they're straight up just destroying culturally significant things, they should be deported, right?
That's also something I've been talking about on my channel. We have a lot of foreigners who do that. I gotta be honest, just because they think Japanese won't fight back, Japanese won't say anything, or they're taking advantage of Japanese politeness or kindness, or even shyness. And it's very natural that as a Japanese, if we see that game, we feel like, oh, they can do that because they think Japanese won't say no.
私は当該の
Right, and that's the other thing, is that the game's influence might cause more tourists to come over to Japan and make people think that they can be disrespectful because of how seemingly nonchalant the people are in the game when they react to Yasuke going around and being destructive. That's another example of a foreigner being destructive to Japan.
ゲーム機の中で、NPC、ノンプレイヤーキャラクターっていうものに対してとかですね、承諾なく使用された施設の映像の中で攻撃や破壊する行為が現実世界で模倣される迷惑行為につながるんではないかと懸念しております。先ほどの
And we already have copycats.
宮司さんや関係者の皆様もそれを心配されておりました。もちろんですけど、これ申し上げたいのは表現の自由というものはもちろん尊重されなければいけません。だが一方でですね、長い間地域の方々に培われた文化に対しまして敬意を持って接する。
So you can see they're trying to be respectful of the fact that freedom of speech is important, obviously, because Japan is, as far as I'm aware, still a democratic country thanks to our Western influence. So they very much so believe in freedom of speech, kind of like, or not kind of, they believe in freedom of speech like we do. And they can obviously understand and respect that France has a right to say and do what it wants. Their point, though, is that what they're doing and saying is causing cultural unrest within the country. And obviously, this has upset a lot of people, especially Japanese people, and they need to take it seriously. And the government can no longer ignore this because it's essentially like inciting violence, in a sense.
その土地の文化を軽んじる行為は私は慎むということは大事なことだと考えております。まあ、例えばですけど長年経緯やですね信仰されてきたフランスのノートルダム大聖堂とかですねイスラム教のコーランなどにですね礼を失するようなですね、映像を使われていたらどんな気持ちにその現地の人たちはなるかこれはもう言わずがもがなでございます。
Right.
Yeah. We all agree on this. Yeah, any culture, any religion, you shouldn't be rude about it. If you disagree, that's fine. You're welcome to disagree, absolutely. But you shouldn't be like inciting hate or inciting violence on someone just because they believe something else. We need to be tolerant of people of other cultures. That's incredibly important.
本当にこれは私思うんですけども総理就任後初のお国入りにですねまず地元の八頭町の渡神社を参拝しました石破総理にお伺いしたいんですけども、ゲーム SNS 等によりまして多文化を軽んじる行為やそれに伴う観光公害についてご所見をお伺いしたいと思います。
I think it's a good
石
question.
破内閣総理大臣。
これを法的にどうするかということにつきましては、経産省あるいは文科省あるいは外務省とよく協議をしてまいりたいと思っておりますが。
So they don't actually have an answer because it's hard to, as one country, enforce another country's laws. Obviously, they're both part of the United Nations, so I'm assuming you could, if you wanted to, propose something in the United Nations of like, oh, you can't disparage other countries or something like that, but then that restricts freedom of speech, right? So, because you need to be able to say negative things about governments in order to make sure that the people don't get taken advantage of. So the question is, where do we draw the line? And I think legally, the Japanese government's not going to be able to do too much to enforce laws on France, is my guess. Obviously, I don't know how either of their legal systems work, so I'm not going to sit here and say there isn't an answer. Maybe Japan can't do like something like sanctions. I don't know. The whole thing is a huge mess, obviously. But yeah, from a legal side of it, I'm not too sure what they can do. Maybe they'll restrict selling the game in Japan. I know that video games already make culturally appropriate games based on the country they're selling it in. So I don't know if that's already been made, like if there's a Japanese version where you can't destroy shrines, for example. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Or like if the Japanese version, if you can't kill civilians. That would make sense, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem because of social media. Japanese people, I presume, can see content made by English speakers, and they can see the English versions of the game. So they might still find disrespect even if there's like a censored version for Japan. So that doesn't necessarily solve the problem of just saying, oh, change your game within your country, right? Because it goes beyond the country level at that point.
神社に落書きするなんぞというのはもってのほかの話であってですね。
Oh, this just happened.
It
That
just happened?
before.
それは
That's
もうそ
disappointing.
の国に対する侮辱に他ならない
It is an
と私は
insult.
思って
I
い
agree.
るところでございます。で
Like we wouldn't want someone to graffiti on the statue of Abraham Lincoln, right? Or like if someone were to like smash a hole in the Washington Monument, right? We wouldn't allow that. And if like a foreigner was doing that, we would obviously deport them. So I think Japan should equally be deporting foreigners who do the same thing to their holy sites as well. I think we need to be intellectually consistent and honest, and I think Japan should be punishing people severely who are disrespecting their culture in such an obviously egregious way. If you're if you're graffitiing on a shrine, you know what you're doing. Like you know.
自衛隊をイラク・サマーワに出しますときに、もちろんイスラム教を信じるとかそういう話ではありませんが、イスラム教のしきたりとか、そういうものは現地に派遣される自衛官たちにきちんと習得していくようにということをお願いをいたしました。
Yeah, so like he's talking about how like the troops that I guess Japan had troops in Iraq. I didn't know this, but they still learned how to be culturally appropriate for the people whose country they're going into. This is just an example he's giving, and I think it's important, you know. But the weird part is that this is ideas going into another country, and obviously with the shrine stuff, obviously that's an example of people not being respectful. But the question is like in a group as disciplined as the military, what kind of disciplinary actions are they going to enforce on people who are not, you know, specifically going for foreign aid purposes, right? Because these are just tourists, right? So tourists are not necessarily educated like other groups would be. So I'm curious if there'll be mandatory education before entering Japan. That could be a good solution as well.
例えば料理を全部食べちゃわないといけないって、日本ではみんな食べないと申し訳ないみたいなことがありますが、じゃあ他の国では全部食べちゃうと足りなかったと。
Yeah, there's different cultural things that are
という
small.
ことに
I
なる
agree.
とかですね。それ表層的なものかもしれませんが、少なくともその国の文化とか宗教とか、
I
そういう
agree.
ものに対する尊敬の念を持つということは、
Yeah.
私は当然のことだと思っておりますし、そうでなければ外交というのもできないと思っております。
Here you go.
そういうものに
He
対
said
す
that
る
without that respect, diplomacy doesn't work.
Sure.
Ubisoft. Listen, this is our prime minister, not just one unknown grifter is talking. Japanese prime minister is speaking.
のことだと思っておりますし、そうでなければ外交というのもできないと思っております。我が国としてそういうことを率先垂範していかねばなりませんし、仮にもそういう行為が
Yeah, and they shouldn't let it slide. And I think that the fact that they haven't been enforcing their rules is a bit disappointing. They should definitely go ahead and take the lead and enforce whatever they can to combat over tourism and to combat like the problem I think the point that he's making is that they are so over tourist that they feel like it's hard to enforce, but I feel like it's really not. I feel like they can enforce it. And obviously diplomatic wise, you know, Japan I would hope wouldn't try and ruin its diplomatic relations with France as a country over something that a private corporation did. So I'm curious what he's talking about when it comes to diplomacy. Maybe he's going to try and convince the French prime minister to maybe, or president, is it president or prime minister? Sorry, I just don't know. Convince whoever's in charge of France to maybe set law, to encourage him to make laws for their country about corporations needing to respect the cultures of other people. I think that'd be a good way to do it.
オーバーツーリズムもそうですが、そういうことがあったら泣き寝入りはしないと。日本国民としてこういうことは許さないということも発信をしていくことは極めて重要なことだと考えておるところでございます。
からひろゆき君。
I feel relieved, but please do something.
まさ
Right,
に
they need to act.
総理のおっしゃる
Absolutely.
通りで有形無形の文化とか風習というものに対してですね、やっぱりこれはお互いがお互い敬意を持ってやらなければ私もいけないと思っております。先ほどの当該ゲームソフトにおいては、日本の部分の文化というものとか施設というものとか、無許可でしかもそういう形で破壊できるようになっている。じゃあ
He's talking about the fact that in other games, like I don't have an example, but like off the top of my head, but for example, there's some culture. Like, oh, here's an example. Like you can't, like for Germany, you cannot have a swastika in your game, so they'll replace it with the Iron Cross. Typically, I believe, in like Call of Duty, for example, it's a pretty famous example. So if you were being disrespectful to like Germans by including like a swastika in your stuff and trying to give it to German people, then that would be seen as like just culturally disrespectful. So in that same way, being able to allow Japanese, like the fact that you're like, and again, social media makes it worse, but like the fact that they're creating things that let you be destructive to Japanese culture, and Japanese people presumably are able to play the game in that state, that is just blatantly disregarding what is culturally appropriate in Japan. And it's something that's very serious that I think Ubisoft should be taking pretty darn seriously.
他国の部分はどうなのかというと、それはできないようになる。
Why is it Japan? Because they typically don't speak out like this. This is the first time, as far as I know, that they've spoken out about this kind of an issue. Again with the tourism, right? Like people going to streamers, specifically kick streamers, I believe it is, will go out of their way to try and be disrespectful on purpose to get a rise out of people in Japan, so that they get a lot of views because people like watching them kind of take advantage of the system that they have there, which hopefully is going to be changing. But that's why people are doing this to Japan specifically, because they feel like they're pushovers, and they really aren't, and they shouldn't be seen that way. So we need to obviously change our views of that. But more importantly, it's important for Japan to be doing this, speaking up for themselves, and just kind of putting their foot down and saying, "Hey, we're done with this. You guys got to stop, or else." Right? They really, I'm proud of them. I think it's really good that they're stepping up and calling out this bad behavior.
なっている。なぜ日本だけなっているのかとかですね。これもやっぱり私問題だと思うんですね。この点についても全てが全てっていうんではなく、なぜ日本だけということについても、私は疑問を持っている一人でございます。そのことについてもまた引き続きですね、なかなか表現の自由と絡めたお話であるかもしれませんが、誤った意味での表現の自由というのは
I'd be careful about saying something like that, freedom taken the wrong way. I think that your definition of freedom is going to be dependent on the country that you come from. So, like, people in dictatorships will sometimes say that they come from a free country because they don't have a full grasp on, like, the freedom that we have in the United States, for example. So I'm very curious if France and Japan treat freedom in the same way that we in the US consider ourselves to be free, specifically with free speech.
私は許されないと思いますので、ぜひともその点につきましてはまた経産省ともども外務省についてもご協力をお願いします。
And here's the other thing, right? So if you, like, say, yell fire in a movie theater, that's not allowed. You're not, like, you have free speech. You are allowed to, like, you can physically say it, but, like, if you say fire and when there's no fire, that's causing harm. That's causing violence, inciting panic, I think it is. I don't know the exact charge, but, like, if you do that, you're going to go to jail because you're not allowed to do that. In that same way, from my understanding, if you are disrespectful to Japanese culture verbally, that is seen as inciting violence or hate towards them. So therefore, in their country, it very well may be a crime. So their version of freedom of speech might be different than how we view freedom of speech here, is my guess. Again, I'm not an expert, but that's just my interpretation based on the way that they're discussing these issues. They're treating it like it's an actual attack on the country. And I think that's because their definition of freedom of speech is limited to not being disrespectful of socially accepted, very valued and respected sites.
お願いしたいと思っております。
ありがとうございます。Yeah, do you remember when I said like a butterfly effect, like when my video was deleted? And because of that video, a lot of people reacted. Because of a lot of people reacted and like the making the wave, right? I was inspired some couple of videos and I started making a video because I see a lot of comments a lot of Japanese comments that was called racist or liar, or you are not Japanese or kind of stuff. And I made that video, the first video of Assassin's Creed. Cool. And after I made Assassin's Creed Shadow video in English, a lot of people in the West talking about it. Or Japanese is actually mad. And then everyone's small voices became really big and finally reached to Prime Minister.
Yeah, he's giving his outro at that point. I've watched this video before. So to wrap up, the reason why I'm talking about this is because obviously as a small content creator, I feel like it's important for me to do my part in talking about these bigger issues. I'm sorry we've had to pivot away from the mocking killing floor stuff to now we're going after this, but it's important, and I don't think it should be ignored. I think Ubisoft needs to take this pretty darn seriously and probably reconsider things for the future. I'm not sure that if they can even make any changes at this point to the game. Obviously, it's a bit too late, but hopefully something can be done, especially to fight the over-tourism that happens. Maybe I should make a video about over-tourism. I don't know. I don't really want to, because then I have to watch the clips of all those people being disrespectful. It's just going to make me mad. I'm sure you can look it up yourselves if you want to, but that's all I have for this. Hope you guys enjoyed. As always, I'm Elwirfy. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will definitely see you guys next time.